The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. Day of the NBA trade deadline where the Suns, did almost nothing. Maybe nothing would have been better. How you doing, Sam?
I'm alive. Just barely, like all of us, but I'm alive. We survived collectively another trade deadline. There is so much to cover, given how much inactivity there was on the part of the Phoenix Suns this deadline.
I think that there was a point, maybe it was in the third quarter of the OKC game, but there have been multiple points during this current season where I've thought to myself, how could this get any worse? And the answer was, like this. everything that happened in the last few days is possibly the worst things that could happen for the Suns for this individual season.
There are a couple exceptions to that, and we will need to get to them.
We can talk about the future of the Suns and if it was ultimately a good thing that they didn't use all their assets now for a team that is struggling mightily to stay over 500 and currently not over 500. We could talk about that. But what happened in the last week is the Suns very publicly tried to trade their best player, very publicly, and then were shot down by that best player. They, for months, coveted Jimmy Butler for months and were very clearly trying to trade what many people would call their third best player to get him, failed in that endeavor, and then were completely sniped from that trade by the Golden State Warriors at the last second. And then after all that, had to trade Nurkic because of how much of a toxic asset he became on the Suns. And in order to get rid of them, they had to attach a first-round pick to do it. To me, this was an embarrassing week to be a fan of the Phoenix Suns. And quite possibly, I think, a great example of just how the Suns, in my opinion, have lost any culture that they built since the James Jones tenure started. Because ultimately, and I'm sorry, I'm going full ISO here, but
no, go full Hezzy Jimbo. It's your turn. Your turn.
When James Jones was hired to the Phoenix Suns, to his credit, he said the number one most important thing to do for this franchise is to establish a culture, to establish a winning culture. He fired a coach that only had one season in order to hire Monty Williams. He traded Kelly Oubre and more for Chris Paul. He brought them onto the team to establish continuity, development, and culture for the Suns. And guess what? It worked. They temporarily built a winner. They built a team that went to the NBA Finals. They built a team that won 64 wins, the most the Phoenix Suns have ever won. And then they made massive move after massive move after massive move, and now are in a perpetual state of trying to undo them in order to fix the disaster they created. It's an embarrassing time to be a Phoenix Suns fan. I just cannot believe how awful the last few days were for this team in its current iteration.
Respectfully, Mike, and I agree with much of what you said, but I also, I want to pick out the differences with where our heads are at. It's been an embarrassing 2.5 years to be a Phoenix Suns fan, too. Just with the way that they've consistently played with no joy, despite having these supposedly championship expectations for quite a while. And so 90% of this undoing, this culture's undoing that you're talking about is on Matt Ishbia. And so we need to have the Matt Ishbia conversation, of course. He needs to wear the dunce cap, hold his L, get out of the way from now on. Let the basketball people make the basketball decisions, and that's what he needs to do. He has a lot of lessons to learn. I love the fact that he's willing to spend money. I love the fact that he cares about the fan experience, but obviously he has a lot to learn. In terms of what the Suns tried to do and what they failed at this week, there are endeavors that they failed at that I think that's great. You didn't get Jimmy Butler? Great. Excellent. Thank God for not digging even deeper and getting us Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, have fun in Golden State. Have fun in San Francisco, bro. The Western Conference is hard. You haven't been trying all season long. Now you're getting thrust into it. Now you have to start trying alongside Steph. It's going to be a high-pressure situation. There's like 10 teams in the West that are still better than you. Good luck. Have fun. I'm glad that's not us. There are certainly other things that, like, they botched the KD situation, so we'll talk about that. The Nurk trade, I don't think is 100% a disaster. I
It
could
is.
see.
It's
No.
definitely a
I could
disaster.
I can see both sides to that. We got to talk about that one. So we'll get to that one whenever you want. But they didn't have to do it right now. They certainly, to your point, they didn't have to do it right now. They could
What
have
did they
held
do
off
it for?
to get under the second apron.
If they can do that, right?
Yeah,
They're still,
but I think they can. People who are smarter than I am are treating it like they can, so I believe that they can.
Okay, maybe they can in the offseason, right? It wouldn't happen until the offseason anyway.
Yeah, no, they didn't.
So they gave up a first-round pick for the possibility of potentially doing that in the offseason.
Before we talk about, at a certain point, we'll talk about Cody Martin and Vasilija Micic and like the players who they brought in, whether they play for the Suns or not.
You mean the expiring contracts that they brought in? Apparently,
yeah, but we still should. We owe them that,
of course,
or we owe the listeners that. To your point, though, with why they didn't have to do the Nurkic move right now, the argument to get Nurkic out of the locker room was to avoid it becoming this,
what it already
toxic,
is, apparently.
this toxic thing, which is what it already is and what it is going. Let's be honest, going to be for the next 2 months.
Okay,
the Suns already. No, wait. Let me just finish this one thought. The Suns were already playing this dispirited, completely apathetic basketball the entire season. They are going to do an even worse job of that, even more extreme version of that for the next 2 months. They're not going to try.
If you're James Jones and you're Matt Ishbia, you could point at the big giant Bosnian player and say it's his fault that the locker room is toxic. But you also tried to trade Bradley Beal for the last 2 months and then very publicly failed in secretly trading Kevin Durant in the last few days. If you're concerned about the locker room being toxic, maybe don't publicly try to trade two of your more important players. That's going to turn the locker room toxic. If you want to talk about a toxicity in the locker room. And by the way,
I just want to say, yeah, go ahead.
For a very long time when James Jones was the general manager of this team, nothing leaked. Nothing. We've talked about it all the time on this podcast. We're not getting anything. Trades would come out of nowhere. We wouldn't get anything until the day of the trade, if anything. And then Matt Ishbia took over. Bartlestein got here. Nothing is private anymore. Everything the Suns are doing is out there. And teams do stuff like this all the time, what the Suns are doing. In fact, the Suns did stuff like this all the time. They privately shopped Nurkic. Shopped Ayton basically every opportunity they had, and it never leaked.
Yeah. Well, just practically speaking, also, the more heads you have making decisions, then the easier it is for something to leak. We still don't know, and we always suspect that, ultimately it comes from Ishbia, but there's the Ishbia element, there's James Jones, there's Josh Bartlestein, there's Isaiah Thomas, who is still an influential voice in that front office.
Yeah.
So there are if you are hoping that the Suns are going to leak information to you, it's not just one person that you go to anymore. You have 4 or 5 potential sources, if not more. I want to push back on one thing, and I will point out, I just recorded an episode filling in for Kevin Zimmerman on Empire of the Sun with Kellen Olson about also my reactions to the deadline. And so I'm trying to not, I would encourage people to go listen to that too. I thought it was a good conversation, and I'm trying not to rehash too much of what I said there. One double point that I do need to make, though, on the Ramona Shelburne thing about the locker room being toxic, I kind of think she's full of shit. And I think there's a difference between, she said shoot-around was awkward after she said there were reports about it being toxic. She said it was an awkward shoot-around. Duh. Shoot around is always going to be awkward the day of the NBA trade deadline. 90% of the league, 95% of the league at this point, look what happened with Luka, knows that they could be on the move at any moment. It's always going to be awkward. But if you look at the actual characters that are in the Suns locker room, the types of quote unquote professionals that they have, like what I said to Kellen, you're not going to have a Draymond Green character who's making things toxic by swinging on anyone at practice. That's not going to happen. The worst that we're going to see is that they're going to continue to play this 36 unbothered style of basketball where they don't really take things seriously. And that is not at all a change from what we already saw and was already the reason that half of these guys were on the trading block in the first place. So I don't really buy the whole toxic thing. I mean, like, I buy that it's awkward. I buy that these guys don't really care about playing competitive basketball, but that is not a change. Nothing changed about that. That's how we got in the situation that we're already in. That's the situation that we now need to get ourselves out of. Toxic is a different word, and I don't think toxic describes what they are.
I don't know. We're not there. She's definitely closer than we are to that situation, so I can't say what's true and what's not. If it wouldn't take much to convince me that things are not great in that locker room right now is all I'm saying. Now, whether or not her report is accurate, who knows? Let's just quickly. I just want to spend a little more time on Matt Ishbia and James Jones because look, the Suns had a lot of things that they talked about in this trade deadline, and some things could have been good, some things could have been bad. And look, if we want to over time get into all of those individual things, we can. And I want to talk about Jimmy Butler ending up on the Warriors a little bit more as well. But to me, there's just a conversation that needs to be had about this current iteration of the front office. And to me, it's very obvious that things need to change. And I'm not sure what that change needs to be, but we can just sort of break it down a little bit because I think that's, to me, we can talk all we want about the current state of the team. But like the reality is they're probably not going to be great for the rest of the year, and they're going to be struggling to stay in the play-in area. And if they put it
just
together,
for evidence of that, in case anyone doesn't already know this, because I know the stat has been shared, but not everyone is on social media, the Suns have the strongest strength of schedule remaining of any team in the NBA. They have the hardest schedule. They are consistently going to be playing the best teams compared to any other team, right? And they're healthy right now, knock on wood. That's good. They're healthy, but does not bode well for them if they're not like completely locked in.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be their easy stretch, January.
And they won games. They more than they had been before that. They lost to the Trailblazers twice to end it all.
Yeah, sometimes they won games, but not as many as they needed to.
So I just want to just quickly touch on this was to me a bad week because you're talking about maybe it was good they didn't trade for Jimmy Butler. They wanted to. So if you believe that it was good that they didn't trade for Jimmy Butler, it wasn't because they didn't try. They did everything they could to try for that. They were trying to work out 5-team trades to make sure to do that. Now
there's nuance in that though. If I can just real quick, because they wanted to trade for Jimmy Butler for Kevin Durant in a way that would have given them something that still allows them to compete with that they could compete now, but also future assets. That is my understanding of the package they were trying to build. You can disagree with that strategy. That's fine. But that's a very different thing from the particular path that I disagree with, which was let's build another big three in a Beal for Butler package.
They tried to do that too. Both of those things they tried to do.
I don't know how hard they tried for that first one.
Very hard. Very hard. That's definitely something they were attempting to do. It's just that with Beal, it becomes a lot more complicated and ultimately impossible with the situation that they were running into. So, it is what it is. But the point is, I can't reward the front office for not trading for Jimmy Butler. In fact, I still wanted Jimmy Butler on the team. I thought there was a world where actually that could make sense and be good. So, that's kind of how I view it overall. But the way that this all went down, with probably pissing off Bradley Beal, probably pissing off Kevin Durant, to me is something that you just can't have happen on a regular basis for this team. And it seems as though every single instance that the Suns have had to potentially trade for a player since Matt Ishbia has joined the team, there has been so much around that every time, whether it be the first trade deadline, the second trade deadline, the off seasons that he's presided over. It's just been so much has been happening in those as far as stuff the players can see and stuff players from other teams can see, stuff that makes the perception of the franchise, I think, look worse. So things have to change in order for stuff like that to be played a little closer to the vest, played a little more professionally, if you will, played from an angle that actually cares about the players in some sense, because in my opinion, this was not done in that way. And here's the thing. For a long time, I have maintained the idea that James Jones has done a good job for this team, and that when Matt Ishbia got here, he's the one that pushed for putting all the assets on the table at every opportunity that they have. And in some ways, that could lead to a good thing for this team. Kevin Durant was a trade that you and I celebrated profusely when it first happened. And look, the team has not been great since then, but there's a world where Kevin Durant and Devin Booker should have been on a great team. And it hasn't been. That hasn't been the case since that happened. Blame whoever wants to blame whatever direction they want to point it, you can, whatever. It didn't work. It hasn't worked. And so to that end, I want to say that in some ways, a lot of this blame can be pointed directly at Matt Ishbia, classic owner meddling too much, not letting the basketball people do the basketball things in order to benefit the team. But having said that, James Jones, one of his best skills that he had when he joined the team was finding a way to get Robert Sarver out of the way. Because I think there is an element to being a James Jones, or a general manager, if you will, that is sort of managing up, finding a way to manage the owner and get them out of the way. And that requires like a severe amount of trust from the ownership group to the general manager group. And maybe it worked out in James Jones's favor that Robert Sarver was going through a little controversy during that time and probably stepped back from that role a little bit, allowing James Jones to do things that he wanted to do. But like ultimately, a lot of the moves that were made to make the team good happened before that. And James Jones presided over that. And some good draft picks, some good trades resulted in a finals trip, yada, yada, yada. Matt Ishbia didn't hire James Jones. And I'm not sure that there's enough.
And he also spent $4 billion or whatever it was on the team. Exactly. Of course, he was going to maintain authority over basketball decisions. Doesn't matter who was in the front office.
I'm not sure that there's enough level. I don't know that James Jones has the ability to tell Matt Ishbia no, if you will, or to make if that even is the case. Maybe they're on the same page with all of these moves, right? Maybe James Jones is just as responsible. You know, I see a clear demarcation of when the team operated differently and before that, and it all stems from Matt Ishbia to me. But I just wonder if there's a world where there's somebody else that could do this, and I worry, you know, with Matt Ishbia that it's Isaiah Thomas or something, and it's just in a worse and it's just a worse situation, like ultimately. Because I do think James Jones is a good general manager, and I know that seems to be controversial now because people hold him responsible for every bad move that's existed since Matt Ishbia. And I don't see a owner in Matt Ishbia that's not involved in every single aspect of all of that and pushing things for the things he wants. And that's what happens when you own a team. You're allowed to do that, but it's tough for me to blame all of that on James Jones. I just don't know that there's a situation where James Jones will survive this or should survive this, not to mention Bartlestein or anyone else involved. And I don't know that necessarily could lead to a worse situation. Maybe it will lead to a better situation.
It could. I mean, it could lead to a worse situation. It could lead to a better situation. Really, it's just a question of what path do the Suns want to take going forward? What path does Devin Booker want to take going forward? And, you know, because that's going to be very important in dictating what they do this summer. And ultimately, you need a general manager and front office executives who are suited to match that. Are you looking for a 3 to 5 short-term year rebuild where you're trying to get right back in things, and or even shorter, like within 2 or 3 years? Or are you trying to tear it all down to the studs and Sam Presti it? You know, like I have my doubts that they would ever go, or that Ishbia would ever go for the second strategy. Mm-hmm. But technically there are different paths that they could take, and you need a general manager to match that. I think James Jones could be suited to a retool around Devin Booker type of timeline. I think he absolutely could. But to your point, do they need a scapegoat right now? Maybe. I don't think the Suns have a future at all unless Matt Ishbia learns from his mistakes. That's really the critical bottom line here, is he can hire whoever he wants. He needs to learn from this and understand that it's when it's time for him to get out of the way. And then, are other people going to suffer for various decisions? Was it Bartelstein's idea to do the Brad Beal trade, and maybe he shouldn't survive for that? That's possible too. But like generally speaking, it starts with Ishbia, and the other guys, they'll make decisions. Tossing another coach into the meat grinder certainly isn't going to help. I hope Bud is able to survive all of this.
Yeah, and it's not even to say
they have a
he's
lot of
been
work
doing.
to do.
I don't even think it's to say that Bud's been doing a great job.
No, I don't think so either. I just think it would be so catastrophically stupid of them to fire a third coach in 3 years.
Yeah.
It's.
I agree. And I think there's still issues
Indefensible.
with how he's coaching. I just think as a franchise, when you're trying to establish overall a winning culture, continually moving guys in and out of that position is not going to work. And, I don't know what will work for this team at this point, because they have what are extremely talented basketball players on it that appear to not fit very well, and they're not winning games. They're just not winning games at this point. And often when they lose, they're getting their asses kicked. It's not just a regular loss, and that is something.
Devin Booker even said to Dwayne Rankin the other day, because Dwayne asked him about the 8-1 start. He was like, "What's the difference between now and the 8-1 start?" And Book said, Book is one of the most media trained NBA players you'll ever see. So honestly, if I get anything interesting from him out of a post game presser, like that's a once in a year type of event with Devin Booker for me personally. And he said something like, when we were 8-1, we weren't taking care of business. We were just scraping by, like basically admitting at no point this entire season, I think you could argue, going beyond that, the past 2.5 years, pretty much the entire KD era. But at no point this season did Devin Booker really have faith that they were playing the right brand of basket, that they were truly competing at the level that they expected of themselves.
During that 8-1 start, we talked about it too. Somebody asked us a question, I believe, in one of our mailbags about that, and it was true at the time. Their net rating did not match their record, and it ended up flipping a little bit more after that when they started losing games. I mean, to be fair, there was a Kevin Durant injury that impacted it pretty dramatically there as well, because they were playing really well with Kevin Durant before that injury. And when he missed games, they lost basically all of those games, I think, during that injury, and looked terrible. And anyway, we're at the situation we're at now. Let's talk about the trade they did make. Like, we actually have to talk about that trade, and that is Nurkic and a 2026, I believe, first-round pick for Vasa Micic and Cody Martin, one of the Martin brothers here. And this was a very clear, easy
and
to
don't
understand.
forget the 2026 second round pick, the worst of Denver's and Golden State's.
Denver's and Golden State's, yeah. So they do have a second round pick that they got back for that, which I think was kind of interesting that they could find a way to squeeze that out of them a little bit.
Initially, when the trade notification hit, I don't remember, it was probably Shams, like all of them were.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, because it didn't specify which second round pick, and I was like, oh yes, they got Charlotte's 2026 second round pick. That's a good pick.
It's practically a first round pick, yeah.
Charlotte will continue to be bad, and then of course they got the bad second round pick. That's probably going to be closer to like 50th overall.
It's a pick. They got one. I'll give them credit for that. But this was clearly them trading that 2031 first round pick for 3 first round picks and using one of them to dump Nurkic because they don't want him or his salary on the team, not to mention any salary beyond this year, which he was signed for next year for $18 million approximately. They don't want that. He wasn't playing at all anyway, so they got another 6'5" guard/wing in Cody Martin, which is funny. This team is full of them. And then Micic, who probably will not play on this team, has not been very good this year. Was a very good player in EuroLeague. I believe he won MVP, actually, his last season in the EuroLeague. Came to the NBA, has not quite put it together on the Charlotte Hornets so far. And maybe he could find ways onto the court if he has a different role for the Suns. He's a point guard, so like that is what he does. I can't imagine he's going to play much. Yeah,
I don't expect him to play at all. He's an incredible passer. He's tall. He's not 6'1" or 6 foot, whatever Tyus is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help the fact that he can't move his feet, can't defend, and can't really shoot, can't finish.
Older, I think, too,
he
for a
shoot
player.
threes,
yeah,
but can't finish. So we're talking about a limited skill set. It happens with Europeans sometimes. Like by the time they win an MVP in the EuroLeague, they're already 30 and technically out of their prime, and then they try and come over to the NBA, and it's tough. It's a tough transition at that age. Cody Martin's a real NBA player, but he's definitely a real NBA player. He's a classic James Jones wing, good defender. Can't really shoot, but can hit an open three. Can't really shoot, but can hit an open three. Can handle the ball. Worthy of 12 to 15 minutes per game if you need him to do that. Now, I don't want him to take any time away from Ryan Dunn.
It's tough.
That's another thing to talk about. And I think, okay, we're at a certain point, not right now, but at a certain point in this episode, we need to talk about moving forward, next 20 or 30 games or whatever, what the Suns' rotation, what changes need to be made to the Suns' rotation. Because even though they're not bringing in many new players, they absolutely need to make some changes to the rotation. And you could see whether or not Cody Martin plays as a reflection of that. But ultimately, when I found out that Cody Martin, because I didn't realize initially, is non-guaranteed for next year, and that by treating both of these guys as expiring contracts, again, it's not guaranteed, but maybe there is a pathway for them to get out of the second apron in the summer, that was the light bulb aha moment. This is why they did this trade.
Pretty clear, right? Yeah, and I agree with Cody Martin's. I think Cody Martin can be an NBA player. I just don't think this is a great situation for him. I actually feel kind of bad for him just with the amount of guys at his size that are likely going to be ahead of him in the rotation for the Suns. They didn't trade for Micic and Cody Martin specifically because they need them to play, right? It just doesn't look like that based on the way this trade went down. They traded for them because they're expiring contracts, and Cody Martin could get minutes on this team, especially if guys are hurt or injured or resting or whatever it ends up being as the season rolls along. He could definitely get minutes on the team. And even Micic, if it comes down to it, like Tyus missed some games and Monte plays.
We still have Monte, but yeah, of course he could.
Maybe he can get out there a little bit and still play some minutes, but it seems unlikely. Really, not been great as an NBA player so far. Likable player, like his highlights from EuroLeague, very fun. If you want to see some fun highlights, watch some of his. It's very, very fun. Shot a lot of pull-up threes actually when he played in EuroLeague too, but none of that has really translated to the NBA. It's a scenario, I think, here with Nurkic where he was so bad and his attitude was so bad that if there ever was any hope that he could retain any trade value for the Suns, it was gone weeks ago. So they had to attach something to get rid of him. And I don't like this. I think it's a disaster that it got to this point. I don't think this trade brings any value to the Suns. I think giving up a first-round pick to trade a guy like Nurkic, who's in this kind of situation, is sort of embarrassing overall.
Yeah, it is.
I understand wanting to get rid of Nurkic. He was not he's annoying. I didn't like him. He was a bad basketball player this year, and he was complaining to the media constantly.
The DA stands are also getting their shots in today because they're rightfully
right.
I'm going to say let me say it. I am rightfully defending their ability to take shots at James Jones and Ishbia and Bartelstein for this. The fact that DA trade now looks embarrassing. Its return is, what is it? It's going out was Ayton, Toumani Camara, and the 2026 first round pick, if you include the pick included in the trade today, that was used to bring in Grayson Allen, Cody Martin, and Vasilije Micic. It is embarrassing. Yeah. Now, that doesn't change the fact that I thought and still think that Ayton is soft as Charmin and was embarrassing, unreliable and embarrassing for much of his son's tenure. And I think it's okay to have the opinion. You don't have to take sides between DA making his $30 million and Nurkic making his $18 million. You could take the very reasonable stance that actually both of them suck, and we should recognize that both of them suck.
The most reasonable,
but they did not. They got a horrible return out of Ayton. That is true.
They shouldn't have waited. If they wanted to trade him, they shouldn't have waited until the point that they did when he had lost all his trade value in DeAndre Ayton, because even
reminds me of a situation they're dealing with right now.
No, it's even if they're in the scenario where Ayton never quite gets to what he was, there was a lot more value in what he was previously on the Suns before some poor playoff performances, particularly viral clips of his lack of effort, I think, which, look, fans see And I'm not going to lie, front offices see that stuff. It's not like invisible to them. They know what it looks like when they trade for a guy that has viral clips of a lack of effort and struggles, for effort throughout his career. But the real problem that they had is they should have traded him sooner before all of that sort of was known. And they didn't. And that's why they got the trade that they got. He didn't have trade value at that time either. They definitely tried to trade him. We know famously that they almost traded him for Sabonis until the Sacramento Kings put Halliburton on the table for him, and the Suns could have had him without that, and that didn't go through. And that was, we can look up when that trade was, a few years before that, and they ended up in the situation they ended up in. But the Nurk tenure, one season in the regular season where I think you could say he played better than the expectations, because honestly I didn't expect he was going to be great. I just thought he was going to be serviceable, and during the regular season his defensive numbers were good. Fast forward to the postseason, disastrous postseason for Nurkic. The worst player on the Suns probably in that postseason.
Beal wasn't far behind, but yes,
Beal struggled mightily. And then that led to this season where Nurkic couldn't do anything effectively on the floor, and I think by some metrics actually was one of the worst players in the NBA.
And also remained completely delusional throughout this whole process as to what his own capabilities were, and consistently took shots at the coach and the other players and the system, and just did not believe in what the team was doing, could not take criticism, was obsessed with calling out fans and reporters on Twitter. I mean, just the whole thing. I'm glad he's gone. It's embarrassing. I agree with you that they had to give up a first-round pick to get rid of him. We should explain just the importance, though, if they can get out of the second apron, if getting rid of a first-round pick was the cost of getting out of the second apron, why would the Suns do that? Just to make it very clear for why they might do that. Couple things. Mm-hmm. One, if you're in the second apron for, 3 out of 5 years? I believe it's 3 out of 5 years. The league starts, because the Suns actually have picks now for most of the years in the next decade. If you're in the second apron too often, the league starts moving your first-round picks to the end of the first round automatically. So you will draft 30th every year until you get out of that second apron enough years. So partially there, it could just be a way for them to not have to start the counter on that process, right? If they're saying that we're going to suck anyway, then we might as well not suck and also have to be in the second apron, and then maybe our picks will always be 30th, although they'll always be close regardless. The other thing, though, that I think is more important and is interesting is that once you get out of the second apron, you can aggregate contracts and trades again. And that opens up all sorts of flexibility, all sorts of options for the Suns going forward to be either very smart or very stupid, potentially very, very stupid, depending on what they want to do. But here's a classic example. Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal were not moved today. I think that's interesting because technically, if you wanted to sell on those guys, I think those are the types of role players who could command you a first-round pick. They are under long-term contracts, however, and next season, those contracts will add up to $27 million. Now, there's no real significance behind the value of $27 million, except to say that right now the Suns couldn't trade for any role players making more than Grayson or Nurkic's value, right? There were basically no players in the $17 to $27 million range that they were eligible to trade for this offseason, but there are going to be a lot more players that they could maybe trade for in that range in the summer, and that could potentially be interesting, or, like I said, really bad, depending on who they're looking at pairing up Devin Booker and Bradley Beal with going forward. But it is an option. They have tradable role players, and they will have multiple first-round picks that they could squander on someone. So it's just another reason to think about why they would want to get it out of the second apron as soon as possible.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a situation I think that would be beneficial for this team going forward, but particularly if they're just not good. Why stay in the second apron if you're not going to win games? There's just no reason to handicap your potential future in that scenario if you're not winning games. And if they put it together somehow and they win a ton of games, end up the 6th seed and win a few rounds in the playoffs, stay in it all you want. Figure out a way to stay in it and try to be good. But that seems like a very unlikely scenario. The Suns haven't given anyone confidence that they're going to do that. Do you have anything else on this? I guess before we switch over to other trades, because I do want to talk about that too.
I do have a couple other things, but go ahead.
Okay, let's talk about the rest of the season real quick.
Yeah, that's where I want to go.
Because I think the rest of the season, and then even we could touch on the off season and what the Suns are actually looking at going forward here. they just have to figure out a way to put it together, get through these last few games, and if they find ways to win, that'd be great. Like I said, not a lot of confidence in that here. Maybe they continue to hover around 500 with the toughest strength of schedule in the league for the rest of the season, and we'll see. Maybe they end up at the play-in, fight to make the playoffs, whatever it takes. They don't have their pick anyway, so there's no disaster.
It's a Cinderella run,
yeah,
right?
Maybe.
They start as
against
the 10th
all
seed
odds, yeah,
in the play-in, and then against all odds. I mean, this is the lowest I've ever felt about the future of the organization, covering this podcast or covering the team for this podcast for 7 years now. But we're all still going to be torturing ourselves watching these games. If you're listening to this pod, then I imagine, and this is the other reason, Matt Ishbia, if you're listening, and I know you're not, I'm going to torture myself watching these games. I want to make sure that you are confronted with what you've done every single game. You better be there, bro. You better be there. You better be watching this product, this disinterested ass basketball. You need to be confronted with it so that you can learn. And we don't blame you. Nobody blames you for the KD trade, but you got to learn. You just got to be better.
There has to be some future for this team. Like, KD,
there's got to be some future.
Yeah, because like KD will be gone at some point, and Suns fans will still be here, and so they still want to see a future for the team after KD's gone, whether that be retiring or if he's traded, which we'll talk about in a second. But one suggestion: stop starting Tyus. Just stop.
I'm with you. It took me a while to get here, and the past few weeks, honestly, have just, my God, especially now. What do they owe him?
They're
what
not
do they
going to
owe
re-sign him.
Tyus Jones?
They're not going to re-sign
him,
right?
And they're not realistically competing for anything anymore. I mean, again, we hope they make the play-in, but like benching Tyus makes them better anyway. The net rating already bears that out. It is time to stop starting Tyus Jones. And this is what I was going to mention earlier.
I'm pretty sure I could screen Tyus Jones right now. I'm smaller than him. That dude gets screened so easily. It's crazy.
It's a shame. It's a shame because I actually he's shooting the ball so well, but they just don't use him like a point guard. So what's the point? They use him like an off-ball catch and shoot 5'11" player. It makes no sense. And this is how I was going to say earlier. Cody Martin can get in the game. He has an abdomen injury right now, so I think he's going to be out for a little bit anyway. But Cody Martin can get in games without sacrificing Ryan Dunn's minutes. If you just either take Tyus Jones out of the rotation or scale him way back to like 10 or 12 minutes a game off the bench. And then you can run
minutes, yeah.
Sorry?
Backup point guard minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you can run much bigger lineups of point book with Cody Martin and Ryan Dunn. You would kind of struggle with shooting, but would actually be kind of a we have defensive dogs type lineup again. That would be interesting. You could have Grayson or Royce in one of those spots. Obviously, you have KD and then Nick Richards. That's a big lineup that can play real defense, and we need to see it in the second half of the season.
We're at the point where just start Book, Brad, KD, Nick Richards, and Dunn, or even I don't care, Royce, whatever you want to put as that other player in there. Because I understand the lack of shooting with Ryan Dunn has been a problem.
No, we need to see. I disagree with that. I think Dunn will make us better, and I know he's had some rough shooting performances and also rough net ratings in the past few weeks, but he's literally being anchored down. Bud refuses to play Ryan Dunn right now in any minutes where he's not also playing with Tyus Jones.
Yeah.
We need Ryan Dunn to be playing 25 plus minutes a night going forward, because otherwise what are you doing here?
I want to say though, if that happens and they do that, we just gotta, it's just going to be a lot of turnovers. Just be prepared for that. It's just going to be a lot of turnovers because that's something that Tyus does do, is not turn the ball over. And look, as good as Bradley Beal has been lately when he's shooting, I think the opposite side of that is he's struggled to initiate offense and make passes, trying to thread the needle to Mason Plumlee about 3 or 4 times a game in a situation where that's a disaster because Mason Plumlee can't do anything with it at the rim anyway, but the ball doesn't even get to him. So
that's another thing, by the way. Keep going.
And like KD is not, I think, anywhere nearly as bad as Brad has been at initiate the offense, but we know that KD, if you give him the ball too much, it does result in more turnovers. But at this point, who cares? It's still better than starting a 5'11" guy that gets screened.
As much as the turnover issue pissed me off last year, they were still a 48-win team.
Yeah, they won more games.
And right now they're on pace to be honestly, given their strength of schedule, maybe they'll be a 38, 39 win team. Like, it's looking really bad. So you got to do. It's crazy to say that last year is an improvement, but you got to do what brings you back to last year.
Yeah.
And to the second point, you mentioned Mason Plumlee. Mason Plumlee, you're done, bro. It's over. I don't know if his NBA career is over. He's been fine. But again, the point is just we're not really competing. We're not going to re-sign you. Oso should be getting those minutes, and Mason can play sometimes as a third-string center. Oso should be getting those minutes in the second half of the season, because otherwise, what are we doing here?
Or just playing both together. Like, I don't know, just do something. So let's see if there's anything there with Oso, or at the very least raise his trade value. I'll be honest, Oso, when he's on the court recently, not looked very good. I know there's still value in playing players and trying to develop them and figure out if there's something there. Don't get me wrong. Not a lot of exciting minutes there.
Well,
recently been on the court.
Recently it's been third string minutes. Like, it's been garbage time
Yep.
minutes. And there's nothing he can learn from that. It's
Yeah.
like, if you want him to develop at the same rate as Bol, aka no development in 5 years, then go ahead, play him a few garbage time minutes. But I think they need to give him real minutes against good teams, and there's ample opportunity there in the next several weeks.
So I think if you're listening to this and you want to watch the team for the rest of the season, divorce yourself of any expectations of what it's going to be. Who knows what it's going to be? Maybe if they win games, you'll be excited. But if they lose games, try not to let it make you feel bad, because this is a situation that we're in here. But if you're going to play with this team, play lineups that make a little bit more sense. And I understand that you had to promise Tyus Jones that he's going to start in order to get him on the team. Like, that was obvious, even though that's never been explicitly reported. Look, 1 + 1 is 2 most of the time here. So I think we can draw that conclusion. But just don't start him. Play him occasionally. Play him when you need a point guard. Play him when guys are in and out of the rotation here because of injuries. But play the guys that, I hate to say it this way, that are better at basketball. Play Royce more. Play Grayson more, because they're better than him. And he shouldn't be eating into their minutes.
It's unfortunate for Tyus, because when he signed on, first of all, again, I continue to think that Tyus, this is why the toxic locker room thing is weird to me. I continue to think Tyus is another example of a guy who is a great professional, always gives great sound bites. Like, he seems like a really cool dude.
Yes, this is nothing about his personality. That's for sure, yeah.
No, when he signed on, I was like, oh, we're going to have a great season, and Tyus is going to sign for an MLE somewhere. And now I'm like, Tyus, you're just going to get another. I'm sorry, bro. This is the second CBA. Take it up with CJ McCollum and Grant Williams. You're making $2 million next year. It just hasn't worked.
Yeah.
Grow 3 inches. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
you're a backup point guard. It's his role. And it's the right role for him. And on the right team, I think he could be really effective as a backup point guard. But he's just not good enough to be a starting. He's not big enough to be a starting point guard in the NBA.
And the rest of the team
defense is not good enough.
The rest of the team is not. You're right. There are certain teams that could do it, but this team cannot insulate him with enough length around him, because basically every player is too small for their position, with a couple of exceptions. Yeah. So it's really tough. But yeah, changes have to come. Divorce yourself from expectations. Anything else?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, we
have a draft pick this year.
Yeah,
that's one of the things. Not everything this week was for naught, because they can just go and get themselves another Ryan Dunn at the end of this year's first round. And actually, they have 2 draft picks this year. They also have a second round pick that probably won't be very good, but you never know. These are the, some of the bare minimum baby steps that I'm talking about of how this team can get itself on the right foot. But at the end of the day, nothing about this healing process, what is probably going to be a multi-year healing process for all of us, is going to be easy. But if there was an easy solution to it, then Matt Ishbia probably would have already tried it and it would have blown up in his face. So we need to do the not so easy thing and be gradual about this.
Yeah. Let's talk about the other trades that went down at the trade deadline. A couple of interesting ones. I think, we briefly touched on Jimmy Butler and Golden State. They swept in after it was reported that KD nuked the KD trade to Golden State that the Suns were reportedly actually negotiating. And so like they were like, all right, let's just go get Jimmy Butler. And it seems like they made the decision to offer him the extension that the Suns were reportedly from Gambo going to give him. So matching whatever money he was going to get in Phoenix. And they immediately gave that to him as soon as the trade went through. And I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think it's a pretty good trade for them. I think it's cool for them to look at the end of Steph Curry's career likely over the next few years and just put everything they can into that. And if it doesn't work, it might not work. But like when you win that many championships for Steph Curry, I think you've earned the right for them to put those kinds of assets on the table to try to make a winner while he's still playing. And so if this works, it works. And if it doesn't, I think it's admirable that they're doing the best to build a winner around Steph Curry.
I think I agree that they had to do it. I'm just glad to see that there was a team more desperate than the Suns out there willing to take on Jimmy. To be honest, I'm really relieved. I'm really relieved, and I'm not particularly scared of the Warriors going forward. I mean, they could beat us, but a lot of teams could beat us. Them as a championship contender. The thing is, I don't want to bet against Jimmy in the playoffs because obviously that's a different animal. But they kind of lost a lot of depth in this trade. Andrew Wiggins plus Kyle Anderson plus Dennis Schroeder is a lot. And
yeah, Schroeder was bad on their team, but yes.
Schroeder was bad, but Schroeder was also probably going to be a guy who's 90% bad, but then he's going to win you a playoff game somewhere.
You
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, obviously Jimmy is better than Wiggins. Kyle Anderson's not bad. That's not nothing. I don't know. I feel like they kind of gave up a decent amount here to get Jimmy. I know other people don't feel that way, and I could be totally wrong on this one. It's more so, it's not that it's an awful move for the Warriors. It's just that compared to, like, say, what the Kings did, or what the Lakers obviously were just allowed to fleece everyone with, there are other Western Conference teams that improved. Did I say the Kings? I meant what the Spurs did.
Yeah.
The Spurs or the Lakers. There are other teams that improved so vastly that I just think it's going to be hard for the Warriors to keep up, but we'll see.
I'm not going to fully count them out because honestly, that 2022 championship that they won, it feels like a dream. Like it feels like it didn't even happen. I would have never guessed that the Warriors could win in that year.
For sure.
And having a year where they can really pull it out just by a really good playoff run is not something that I would completely pull off the table for them. And I would have felt the same if Kevin Durant ended up there. I would have felt better, actually, if Kevin Durant, about them winning if Kevin Durant was there. But obviously, Jimmy Butler's there. It'll be interesting to see lineups with Butler and Draymond Green as two guys hesitant to shoot threes and not really great at it. But the defense could be ratcheted up to a really high level with both of those guys on the floor. Let's see. Who else? I think, here was a surprising one. This is not a big, I think, move, but it was one of the last ones that was reported. Terrence Mann and Bones Highland for Bogdan and 3 second-round picks. The Clippers.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about this one because Bogdan's been so bad.
Yeah, I mean, and I like Terrence Mann. Terrence Mann was good against the Suns in the playoffs and just really high effort guy, willing to do a lot of the stuff that you need players to do next to star players, like scrapping, fighting for offensive rebounds, diving on the floor, picking up guys full court, guarding star players. Just somebody who's willing to do all of that stuff is a valuable player to have. And Bogdan, on the other side of that, having one of his worst seasons. I'm just surprised by this trade. Maybe it's some sort of salary reason that I'm not fully up to date with, but Terrence Mann being traded was a surprise for me.
Yeah, well, Atlanta kind of had an interesting one in general because they also did the DeAndre Hunter deal, right?
Yeah.
So I think they just needed change. I'm not exactly sure fully coherently what their strategy is going forward.
Yeah.
The Terrence Mann trade is not bad, but then you also you sold off DeAndre Hunter, who's having a pretty good season, for parts that are worth probably a little bit less than DeAndre Hunter. Although, to be honest, I'm curious your take on that one because I do feel Cleveland's really good, and I understand they wanted to make their starting lineup even better. I do think people are overrating DeAndre Hunter. I think he's a guy who's been in the league for a while. He's had some pretty bad seasons, and so I don't blame Atlanta at all for this year. He's averaging a career-high 19 points per game. Maybe it's just he finally hit his prime, but I think they feel like Atlanta, that is. I think they feel that they're selling at the peak of DeAndre Hunter's value. And they got Karis LeVert and George Niang, who are like slightly lesser role players, but not that much lesser, a couple pick swaps and 3 second-round picks, I feel like that's kind of a haul for DeAndre Hunter. So that plus, trading a horrible Bogdan Bogdanovic for Terrence Mann and Bones Highland, I think Atlanta honestly did a pretty good job.
About a month ago, we were looking at the best three-point shooters in the NBA, you and I think it was a Patreon podcast. And number one, I believe at that time, up to that point in the season, was DeAndre Hunter, who was shooting at the time over 6 3-pointers a game and over 45% from three. Now, his three-point percentage has dropped down. I think he's at 39% now. But he's having a career year, and he shot 38.5% last year on not a full season, but he's having a career year from his three-point percentage standpoint, and he's a tall player listed at 6'8" on Basketball Reference. I'm looking at it right now, and I think it's a pretty interesting trade. I think that often trading ball handlers that can create shots in favor of guys who are more standstill shooters, like that's probably going to be DeAndre Hunter's role. He can do occasional drive things and occasional post-up things too, don't get me wrong, but like his role on the Cleveland Cavaliers is going to be spot-up shooting. Trading guys who can create shots for guys who can't before the playoffs, I always am a little iffy about that because you kind of need guys who can create shots in the playoffs against high-level defenses. So
you're totally right, but there's the other side of the equation, which is, well, he's a little bit bigger, he's a little bit longer.
Tall shooters are valuable, yeah.
In particular, stronger.
Yeah.
And yet you say all of that, and DeAndre Hunter's still not a very good defender. So, I don't know. It's a lot of theoretical stuff with him, and that's why I just think it's interesting. I think it's not a bad move for Cleveland per se, but of all of the swings they could have made, like here's one. Brandon Ingram to the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah.
What do we make of that? I have no idea what to make of that.
He's expiring, I am assuming. Because
I don't actually know. Let me look.
So Pelicans have traded. I'm going to read the tweet.
He is, right?
Pelicans, I think so. Pelicans have traded Brandon Ingram to the Toronto Raptors for Bruce Brown Jr., Kelly Olynyk, 1 first-round pick and 1 second-rounder. Very curious about that.
Expiring contract.
Okay, very curious about that first-round pick. I don't know if there's been some reporting around what that pick was, because it's interesting. Because if it's not a good pick, it's not a terrible trade for them. It's just they're not a very good team. This one has been sort of rumored in DMs by reporters for a few weeks now, if I'm being honest.
So Bruce Brown is also an expiring contract, just to be clear. Because my first thought was, does Bruce Brown still have a few years left? And maybe they're thinking like they could just get off Ingram here and they're looking to make a play in free agency. But no, this must be they want to re-sign him and make him part of the long-term infrastructure alongside RJ and Scotty. Weird.
One thing I think for sure is what the Bulls got for LaVine and what the Pelicans got for Ingram, not very good, man. Tough time for like that sort of, snubbed all-star list of players being traded, because it's just not, non-all-stars, if you will. Has LaVine made an all-star team? I don't think he has, right? It's
because, if I can just posit a theory.
Sure.
Like the hardest thing to convince someone who doesn't have, like, would you rather have Brandon Ingram or Mikal Bridges? Right?
Yeah, no, I'd rather have Mikal Bridges. Yeah,
probably,
sure.
If you're a good team. So if you're a bad team and you're trying to convince a good team.
I'd still rather have Mikal Bridges.
Picks. Yeah. Exactly, because there's a certain function that those high level role players play on good teams that, like a lot of these guys fall into the trap. I mean, honestly, this is where we're at with Bradley Beal too. You're a high level creator, but not actually a high enough level creator to be like the number one option on a good team. And you also don't really play defense. And now it's like, okay, we don't know how to value you at all. And maybe you make like $20 million too much. And we're just not going to really trade any worthwhile assets for you. That's the bucket that all of these guys, Brandon Ingram, who's always been a disappointing defender for his physicals, and Zach LaVine, and now Bradley Beal. Beal's a little bit different because he has a no trade clause thing thrown in there too. But like all of these guys are kind of treated the same way. It's tough.
It's a really fascinating time, I think, to look at the value of star players and how the CBA has sort of changed what these teams actually look like and what these moves and trades look like. Another move I want to talk about. Mark Williams to the Lakers for Dalton Connect, Cam Reddish, and a 2031 unprotected first-round pick, along with a 2030 pick swap for the Charlotte Hornets with the Lakers. So essentially 2 picks in that. Dalton Connect was just a first-round pick. The 2031 pick, which may or may not be valuable for the Lakers, but they're obviously, with Luka trying to be good for the next 5-6 years. And then, of course, 1 single pick swap for the Hornets, which who knows where they'll be in 2030. Maybe they'll be better than the Lakers. Who knows? It's hard to predict something like that. And then Mark Williams, who is having a career year, but mostly because he didn't play much in his previous years in the NBA. And I think a lot of people, and I'm curious because I saw your tweet about it, a lot of people looked at this as kind of a heist for the Lakers in stealing a good player in Mark Williams. Part of me wonders if they just traded for Greg Oden a little bit, and it's just
or Robert Williams, or guys of that nature. I mean, it could end up looking. I think it depends how you feel about Dalton Connect. First of all, I don't know. I think Dalton Connect is okay.
Is he like Kyle Korver? Can he be Kyle Korver? Is the question.
That would be really high upside, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, I think Connect, like most prospects who have come through the Lakers system in all of eternity, gets a little bit, propped up by that media environment and maybe treated as better than he is. And now they're going to do the same thing with Mark Williams, right? Like, I've thought Mark Williams is underrated all season, and now instantly he's going to become overrated. But that doesn't change that there's somewhere in the middle where his true value is. He was putting up like a nightly 20 and 12 and a couple blocks, like 08 Dwight Howard numbers for the past couple months. So I think, and he's also 23 years old. I think there's something really interesting.
When he's healthy, he's pretty good. I have heard effort concerns for him, but LeBron will help with that.
You need a strong rim runner next to Luka.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just like they need a player like that. It's perfect.
Yeah,
so,
I think they could be really good.
I thought it was a smart move.
I don't blame them for that either. I think that's the highest upside player that you could potentially get with the package that they sent out, just with massive injury concerns, which, to be fair, the Lakers are kind of used to that as far as their big man goes, because that's the deal with Anthony Davis as well. It's clear, I think, the biggest winner of the trade deadline was the Lakers just in general, just because what they were able to pull off in the cover of darkness over time. And I think you could follow that up with the Golden State Warriors, maybe a slightly bigger risk for them, or maybe not. I don't know. We don't know much about Luka and why he was traded, but both of those teams probably getting the best players out of this. The Suns, I think, if you read any articles outlining winners and losers, I think I know where the Suns are going to be on that list. I think they're going to be listed as losers of the trade deadline after all they tried to do and what they accomplished, which was very little.
Again, it feels
Except
like
pissing off their star players, by the way, which they did do.
To me, it feels like ever since Game 7 against the Mavs, we've just been continually kind of holding an L, a big L up to the league, but we have to continue to hold that L. Just a few more months, folks, and then I think we can finally make some good progress in the summer. Last trade I just want to get your opinion on real quick. Kyle Kuzma and Chris Middleton being swapped for each other is pretty funny. Kyle Kumza, as I called him on Twitter the other day, actually, when I was making Kuminga puns and jokes, which ended up not coming to fruition. But I hope y'all continue to trust in Scoop C.
Can I ask you, just from a general perspective, who's better,
sure.
Chris Middleton or Kyle Kuzma?
Chris Middleton, I think, is still better.
I think so too, right? It's just he doesn't play much,
Like, Chris Middleton is cooked, and yet this, to me, is a brutal trade for the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm like, really? This is the guy? This is the guy that you're going to bet on? Kyle Kuzma, that is. And they had to give up A.J. Johnson, who's played minutes. It's tough.
It is. I think from the perspective of the Bucks, I understand wanting a guy who is healthier. Like, as Chris Middleton gets older, the risks with him get a little bit more worrisome, I think, for the amount that he's paid. I'm not sure Kuzma's the best fit, but look, Kuzma was on a championship team. There was a lot of bad habits on that Washington Wizards team, and if he can get rid of those and play a little better with Milwaukee, maybe on the aggregate they'll be better, but I'm not sure a healthy version of them would be better than a healthy version of what the team was before they made this trade in the playoffs. So I don't know. It's a risk, I think, but we'll see if it ends up working out for them. They didn't give up too much, really, so I don't know that I blame them from that perspective.
Yeah, not too much. A little bit of cash, pick swap.
Yeah.
Johnson hasn't actually played that much. I overstated that, but was their first round pick this year. So yeah. I don't know, but yeah, we'll see.
All right. Anything else?
Kuzma. No, I think that's it. An hour here. We'll find a way to provide some Patreon content this week too.
Yeah.
Because obviously this one has to go on the main feed. But stay strong. Continue to stay with us. We're gonna keep doing playback streams.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully more Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro minutes to come.
Sorry
Trust
about
in
all the
Scoopsy
yelling
always.
that I did.
I'm gonna keep yelling. I don't care.
Yeah.
We're here to yell. Have fun with us.
Appreciate you guys for sticking around. Back soon.